I can take a cup, look at water in it that you just drank, and tell you that you have good metabolism. First, how did I establish it without any devices? I didn't. I lied. But how do you know I lied? Or I can, pour it in my cup and say that this is a fancy device that's going to analyze this water and now going to tell you that your metabolism is good.
Connected Conversations with Lena Perova. Bridging worlds, one conversation at a time.
And welcome back to the Connected Conversations, where we talk to leaders of various communities about bringing positive impact to this world. And today we have Yuriy Shevchenko, scientist from genetics field. What we are going to be talking about, how can we get lost in translation? That happens a lot. That happens a lot in cross-cultural communication. That happens a lot in company culture. But how can we get lost in translation between government agencies and scientific field? Yuriy, before we start talking about this, let's talk about Yuriy. I've known you for quite a bit, and I know how interesting you are. You live in different countries, you travel across U.S., and tell us, what's your story? You were born in Kiev, you studied in Moscow, you came and you did some work in National Institute of Health. You worked on multiple startups where you ran several projects. You lived in West Coast, you lived in DC, New York, you moved to the West Coast, you lived in California, back on the East Coast, now back on the West Coast. What's your story?
You know my story very well. In fact, this is my story. So, indeed, I'm a scientist and I've been working in genetics and genetic diagnostics my whole life, even though my master's is in physics. Well, my PhD is in molecular biology. But the reason why I was in DC was the National Institutes of Health, where I did my postdoctoral studies. So I've been here for like 4 years. And then on with a company called GeneDx, which my supervisors from the NIH started in the year 2000. Ever since, I've been fascinated with doing this genetic diagnostics thing, which in year 2000 was kind of very novel, very unusual. The human genome wasn't sequenced yet. We had to do a lot of things and that were kind of new to the population, to communities, to scientific community even, and definitely to the insurance companies that were paying for it. But since then and now, I have this feeling that we have been doing the right thing. We have been doing the right thing for the humans around that needed genetic testing. So I'm a strong believer in it. And my story indeed is, I worked I spent 17 years here in DC, then off to New York, worked at Mount Sinai on Upper Side, went to California, worked for another company, then yet another company, which was halfway between California and New York, traveling here and back. And then yet another company that I worked for just recently was in Atlanta, Georgia. I've traveled this country. I've seen different implementations in different maybe angles. Other companies performing genetic testing and different reasons why that is being done. I think I have a pretty good overview of the industry and a good overview of this country's geography.
Indeed, you do. So why genetics?
At first, it was molecular biology and genetics that lured me away from physics. I didn't think that I was a physicist being surrounded by really good physicists, but this was a different dimension that I enjoyed exploring. So it was more and more of it, and eventually I ended up with my PhD in molecular biology. I'm still kind of technology angled. So when you go into the field of genetics, you will find physicians, you will find pathologists, and so on. My angle is creating technologically creating a test that can answer the questions posed by, say, a physician. Physicians are good at examining patients. We are good with our equipment. We put it all together and something comes out of it. And, if you spend 20 years in it, then you know various aspects of it. This doesn't make me an MD by no means, but at least I know what it is that we're testing.
And what are we testing today? It's going to be my follow-up question, because what I was seeing is that, correct me if I'm wrong, during the pandemic, I think that genetic testing particularly spiked in various areas. What do you think?
It did, and it was kind of brought into focus because of pandemic. And there are the positive and the negative sides to it, because clearly there was a need in some type of genetic testing to figure out which strain of bacteria is affecting us now, and that kind of stuff, the viruses, the microbiology that was happening at the time. But a number of people took this as an opportunity to spin up a quick make money operation that either wasn't certified properly or was stretching the needs or performing tests that were not necessary. And maybe that was a part that led to more regulatory concerns on behalf of FDA. I'm sure we'll talk about it later. In general, I have to say that genetic testing is a complex process. Much unlike, primitive to me, maybe, but much unlike the testing of a particular strain of virus. And so by now, due to the evolution of science and evolution of methods with which we can examine humans, genetic testing has gone a long way from what it's been. And so it's harder and harder to regulate because fewer people can comprehend the depths of it, right? Physicians don't have to. They get the result. How this result is achieved sometimes is very non-trivial.
So what are you seeing today? Because you know that FDA came up with the new regulations, and know that labs across the country might not be very happy about it. I know that you and I filed a very recent lawsuit that was filed. So where do we stand today?
Well, so here's the position of FDA as the way I understand it. Listen, you guys, you're doing these genetic tests, and they are no longer trivial. And it is hard for us, and even harder for the patients and physicians and so on, to know whether they're meaningful, or you just do something there in the kitchen and bring out a result. Well, how do we know that that result is valid? So we are going to step in and regulate this because it's our responsibility as FDA. Well, this is lovely, but at the same time, there are complications around it stemming from the labs, from the way genetic testing has historically been regulated and administered. And so right immediately, there were people saying FDA should not regulate genetic testing because it's not a device, it's not an IVD, it's a service, and services should not be regulated by FDA. Devices should be. We're not making a device that we're putting in CVS that you spit at this end, and at the other end you get a result. Oh, you have this. We are cooking up something very complicated that can be only performed in a specialized lab, and it's a service. there are always both sides to this equation. People who are tired of sort of questionable diagnostics want something to be regulated, and indeed that's what FDA's role is. Whether they have done it before or not, they're willing to step in. People who are in the labs, of course, have this angle where, listen, we've done things right, we've known how to do these things, we're the specialists in it. We don't need someone to come here and tighten up the regulations to the point where we will no longer be able to operate the way we do. It inevitably is going to cost more. It inevitably is going to take additional efforts on our part. Listen, we're not operating on that high margin anyway. Don't put more regulatory burden on us. So it's, whenever something new arrives, there's always at least two sides to it.
Correct. And let's bring it to the communication piece, right? Because if we have government, particularly FDA, right? So they're communicating in the language of regulations. And then we have scientists and scientific community. They have their own jargon and communication style. And then we have labs. And those are being run very often by business people.
Right.
So where do we, that's what I call lost in translation. And I feel
Absolutely.
that's where there is a gap right now. So can you talk about this a little bit?
So these are indeed two different communities. They're like, oil and water. They don't mix well. And what happens is, first of all, I don't want you to get a sort of an impression that genetic tests performed currently are poorly designed, something, poorly regulated, done in a scientific jargon, and nobody. They are regulatory agencies. There are certain regulations. There are certain standards that they have stand up to, and there are certain parameters that they have to satisfy before the test can be marketed and can be sold and can be reimbursed by the insurance companies and administered to patients. But FDA used to deal with pharmaceutical companies. So think about, an aspirin that you buy at CVS. You want it to be good, to be certified in such way that you don't have to go and compare, how many units of this and how many units of that it has. None of your business. So FDA takes care of that. But conversely, their regulatory standards are very high because it will be disseminated to regular people. They're not physicians. They're not geneticists. They don't need to know all this mumbo jumbo. They just want something that works. So clinical tests, and IV that they put in you, all of that is very, very regulated. And the terms are different too. The pharmaceutical company terms, as opposed to our, small genetics community terms, are different too. And so what will have to happen, and most likely it's inevitable, in some shape or form it will happen, where FDA will come with their sort of regulations in mind and with their terminology and with their language, and will try to essentially build a bridge to what they intend to regulate. I don't deny their ability or their authority to regulate it, but what matters is for them to understand, in a sense, the lingo of this genetic testing scientific community. It will be hard from the FDA side. It will be also hard from the side of a small lab that's been running this test, that's been developed, in this hospital center or this university, and that can serve the need of this community and test for this specific rare disease. All of a sudden now it has to be submitted to FDA. A lot of work needs to be done. A lot of qualifications have to be passed. And that may be even detrimental to the small lab that will say, maybe we can't provide it, let LabCorp and Quest deal with it. So there will be some centralization of testing, maybe to the detriment of small labs that have been artfully producing this, and maybe to the detriment of new diagnostics being released, because now the burden of delivering a new, very complex genetic test to the field will be much higher.
And in your opinion, how that might affect communities and us, people?
So I am 20 years say that I'm a big proponent of genetic testing, and I think it's finding its way into general public and general communities. It will take probably quite a bit of time. It will take maybe another generation or two to become sort of the standard of care. I mean, you go and take a blood test, you don't question why am I taking a blood test? Well, if you do genetic tests just like that, then we've done something cool. Then we've penetrated the minds. But what I think may happen is, just relating to the previous point, the availability of specific diagnostics may be hindered or delayed. On the flip side, the reliability of the diagnostics will be higher. It'll be certified by FDA. You're heading into it. No one's going to do some funny business. They're going to do something that FDA, the higher source, has certified. So there's always, both sides to this medal. I also wanted to mention if we're talking about communities, the community of us, scientists who do get affected by it, because a lot of effort will be spent on additional certification and in translation. I think translation is the key word here. We will have to somehow communicate between the lab scientists and the regulatory agency of very high standards, that's the FDA. And we will have to find some means of communication, some common terms. We will have to translate from one language to the other. Maybe it can be handled by the language specialists, because come think about it, it's just another linguistic problem. Here's one language and here's another. How do we translate? They do need specific qualifications, and after all, we're talking about science. But I hope that we'll be able to navigate this and build the bridge that will connect both, and that will make it efficient on the side of FDA to not be the burden, to not be the hindrance in terms of time anyway, but rather to take the genetic testing to the next level and find some fast track ways that are absolutely necessary. I mean, there are multiple thousands of tests out there. It's not regulating just one aspirin. No offense to FDA, but it's like thousands of medications have just been unleashed, and they have to regulate it somehow, and these are pretty complex.
So what I'm hearing is that as we are looking into the future of genetic testing, one of the challenges that you're seeing is regulations that might affect various areas, including the communication.
Yes.
Another one, I'm wondering, how do you see AI that is, I'm sure, affecting your industry?
AI is here. We'll love it and we'll hate it. here's the thing. So back in the day, I'd find some variant, and the scientist with PhD and proper, education will have to go and dig up the papers in which it's just being described and understand the meaning of this variant, whether or not it's disease-causing or benign, and so on. Eventually, we had a big database of variants that we've seen before. Oh, that's a variant we know. We no longer need the scientists to go through all this literature. It's there. Eventually, we could build an algorithm that would say, hey, this variant has been preserved in human and in monkey and in mouse and in zebrafish, and so it probably is meaningful. So, okay. But again, I don't need a dedicated scientist to do this. The algorithm can just go through it and say, hey, it's this. So you can see how the complexity of algorithmic development can lead us all the way to AI, which will say, oh, that, I'm sure I know how to handle it. How would the scientist handle it? I just got to do the same thing. Boom, 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 boom. I think it's disease-causing. And now comes the tricky part. Because can AI sign a clinical report based on which a physician will perform treatment of this patient? Can we be sure that this variant leads to this type of cancer, which can be treated with this medication, which would be beneficial for the patient? You would still want a physician doing this. Can the physician comprehend the complexity of what AI, in parentheses, a bunch of scientists contributed to it, has just done? So that's that is non-trivial, and I think AI is just a part of it, and will require proper education on the side of us setting up the tests, on the side of genetic counselors interpreting the test, on the side of physicians agreeing to propose treatment and conveying that to the patients. But AI is definitely a huge help at this point. Well, so I would say that people ask often, hey, you sequenced human genome in, 2003? What have you been doing for the past 20 years? I mean, it's done. Well, it's done to the point that we know all the letters in the 3 billion letter book, but we know very few words. And biology and genetics are very new sciences. They are, 50 years old, 60 years old, 70, whatever. And our understanding and our comprehension of the biological processes is still very limited. If AI helps us to understand it, good. But I think we still got years and years to be able to comprehend certain processes happening in human bodies. And after all, it's not all about humans. It's just we're talking about communities here rather than butterflies. But I'm sure the butterfly geneticist will tell me that there's so many unknown in that field as well. So I think science will evolve. Our understanding of the world around, our understanding of disease will evolve. And AI is a good tool that will help us in this knowledge acquisition and will perform certain aspects that it's suited for better than we humans are. Analysis of huge masses of data, that kind of stuff. I mean, it takes forever, and AI can parse it very quickly. It can suggest further thoughts. It can advance us quite a bit.
So you're seeing it as a positive impact on the scientific community?
It would be impossible to say that anything new is a negative impact. Well, am I going to go and break the Amazon computers so that they wouldn't run AI? I mean, it's here. It's here for a good reason, too. And I think our job is to take advantage of this tool that is available to us now. I mean, it's very sophisticated. I'm sure it will evolve on many levels, and we should make the best use of it. We should be AI friendly.
I'm going to summarize it a little bit. So we have more regulations right now coming from FDA, even so you mentioned that there were quite a few regulations in the past, but now we have more,
Yes.
particularly from FDA, and it's maybe to some degree it was based on post-pandemic and pandemic Wild West world of generating money, so to speak. Then now we have AI. That is also positive impact on the genetics field, right?
Yeah.
So, in your opinion, what challenges, because those are all positive, what challenges we are currently facing?
Well, so it may be science. So science, first of all, needs to continue evolving. Our knowledge, our ability to perform new modalities of genetic testing needs to continue evolving. Research is in many ways driven by the availability of funds. So when economy is in a very good state, R&D flourishes. When it's not, we have to retreat back and try and salvage some basic tests rather than propose new ones, because it takes a lot of money and time to develop new tests. So I hope that the general realization of the value of genetic diagnostics and the general acceptance of this field will let us continue evolving and develop more practical and more actionable tests to the general public. We can do certain things in cancer now, but there's huge amount that we still don't know, and there's huge amount that's being researched today. And so I hope that all these new forays into diagnostics of cancer will bring results in the next few years and will find themselves implemented in clinic to the advantage of the population.
Thank you. And I know that many will say, thoughts of opinions on this in this regard, but many will say that additional regulations might slow down or delay innovation in the field. What would you say to that?
So I think that definitely applies. Additional regulation will slow down maybe not the research, but the implementation thereof in the field, where a company will have to jump through all these additional hoops to demonstrate that what they do actually brings the result. And I think from that standpoint, it will not kill the innovations. It's evolution. It happens, whether we like it or not. But the availability of it may be hindered by the thought that, if someone had to raise $1 billion to validate certain tests, Now they're looking to recoup it. That will be factored in the cost of the test. It'll be factored in the availability of it to the general public. I mean, not everyone can afford this. Not every insurance will pay for it, and so on. So long term, I think it will get resolved somehow, and we stand the opportunity to build this bridge to cross a barrier between FDA and the availability of genetic testing and enable it. The interesting flip side of that is insurance reimbursement of the genetic tests, right? Certain things are reimbursed now. If someone, God forbid, has inherited cancer and they want to get tested, it is usually paid by the insurance. If their relatives need to get tested to see if they carry the same mutation, that usually is covered by the insurance. So obvious things are, but complicated tests are hard to get through the insurance and get paid because we have to demonstrate improved outcomes. Why would insurance pay for some experimental exploration of this patient's cancer if the results will arrive after the patient's dead? I mean, what's the point then, right? So we have to, there's a loop where we have to demonstrate to the insurance companies that what we do is advantageous to the patient. In some ways, FDA certification will serve as a stamp of approval. If it passed FDA, and I've seen it on several tests, if it passed FDA, then it's gone through rigor of, high-level certification, and so it's harder to deny. It's probably not as experimental anymore. It really brings positive results to the patient. So you can look at it from that side, and in fact, FDA in their statement created exactly this statement that we are going to prove certain modalities so that they will be seen as advantageous genetic tests and have better uptake on the side of the insurance.
And my follow-up question is going to be, are there any particular tests that you would recommend to a regular person, more or less healthy, but that is going to be preventive, preventive medicine? So we are all want to take measures before we potentially might get sick.
So there are two things probably I should talk about. One is the fad, testing of ethnicity and where you come from and the ancestry and this, which is a fun thing to do. It generally doesn't affect the clinical decisions. Therefore, it does not need to go through FDA. It's not, it doesn't require that level of certification because no medical decisions will be made based on it, whether you're French or Finnish or African American. Now, that is something that used to be pretty popular. I mean, a lot of friends of mine have done 23andMe and Ancestry.com and whatnot. And if you feel genetically inclined, go do it. You may, for $100, you may learn certain things about you and your parents and your pedigree. That'll be interesting. It'll be maybe new. On the side of clinical genetic testing, I hope no one here requires any of it. But you should know that when sequencing of whole human genome is performed for a cause, like someone's sick and we're trying to find why, and we're trying to establish the variant the DNA variant that is, causing this disease, and we're trying to prove that indeed it's that disease, not another, and so on. If we happen to sequence all of your genome, there are a growing number of genes that the American College of Medical Genetics suggests for incidental examination. That means that if we, for example, were just sequencing the whole genome for some unknown disease, but we happened to have the sequence and the knowledge of these 80 genes, then it's worth examining them as incidental findings, and it's worth reporting the result to the patient. Because indeed, if we have this data, how ethical is it of us to not report it? If by looking at some autistic situation, we could not even locate the reason, but we meanwhile found out that they have inherited predisposition to breast and ovarian cancer, should we or should we not report it? And so this is, to give you a perspective, it's maybe 81 genes at present that are recommended for such review, because very few genes right now we can do something about. If we establish this classic, inherited cancer predisposition, well, you should do mammography more often. You should be prepared that it may hit. You should, But in many cases, okay, well, this child has this disease and they have it due to this variant, but what can we do about it? We don't know how to cure this disease. We don't know how to cure autism. We don't know how to cure so many things that are, in many cases, genetic, but we don't know the cure for it yet. We're very young science. We will know sooner or later.
In the future is interesting. So what do you think about, there are so many clinics right now, particularly in California, where you can go, you can take the blood test, they have the CT scan, you pay what I think that the latest is, it can go up to $25,000, and then they'll tell you everything about you. And, decision yours, what you're going to be doing with this information. As you mentioned, some of the diseases are not curable yet, but you can maintain your lifestyle in a certain way. But what's, in your opinion, with the future of the medicine? Because now because right now it all depends what information you have on your hands about yourself, and then you can create your diet, you can create your lifestyle based on your information you're receiving about your body.
I will link it back to FDA regulation, and here's how. I can take a cup, look at water in it that you just drank, and tell you that you have good metabolism. First, how did I establish it without any devices? I didn't. I lied. But how do you know I lied? Or I can, pour it in my cup and say that this is a fancy device that's going to analyze this water and now going to tell you that your metabolism is good. Now, I got to say you have good metabolism. What does that exactly mean? Or I should say, you should only eat foods that start with A, apples, but not T, tomatoes. So a lot of this science is kind of wannabe science. It's not very regulated, and that's why any person with glasses passes as a knowledgeable scientist. But fortunately, we both wear glasses here, so we are knowledgeable scientists. But from that standpoint, I'd be very cautious about these generalized statements where for $25,000 we're going to tell you everything. There was indeed a company, I think they're still in existence, that was sequencing human genome and performing CT scans and doing some other things, and they could tell you certain things about you, but only within the scope of the knowledge that we possess right now. We're just scratching the surface of this genetics and diagnostics and what. So very, very limited knowledge that we possess. I would not be the one going out there and saying, oh, I can tell you everything about you. I can tell what part of the world you're coming from. Okay, fine. I can tell, how tall you are. Okay, fine. I can tell that you may have certain predispositions. Even that is very probabilistic. It doesn't mean that, certain disease is going to hit you. It's just you have 3 times higher probability of it happening to you as compared to a random person on the street. What is it anyway? What's the absolute? I mean, what is the chance they're gonna fall dead right now? 1 in a million. So yours is 1 in 3 million. Okay, that kind of stuff. But even genetic diagnostics at this boutique level, which really is being popularized, in my opinion, is very limited, and it's limited to the objective knowledge of the facts that we discovered so far. It will evolve. It will continue evolving. But if you don't think you have certain inherited diseases, or you have something that you need to worry about, maybe you don't need to spend $25,000 on the complete genome sequencing and analysis. On the other hand, if you have $25,000 to spare and you want to learn something about your genetics, by all means, come and we'll analyze your genome left and right and to the best of our present ability. We'll even use AI.
And I know that particularly after pandemic, the communities, we realize how important the community it is for us. People realize what it means to live in a closed world. And among my friends, just like you mentioned, among my friends is the same. I noticed that this can speak. The test about looking for your background and looking for your which part of the world you come,
ancestry
became more popular than ever before. How accurate are they?
My answer is it's as accurate as their database. So imagine that you come from an ethnic group of 10 people. We've sequenced all 10. Now that we sequence you, we know that you're either one of these 10 or one of them is your mother, and so you're clearly related to them because your DNA looks so similar to them and so on. Now imagine you discover a new ethnic population of thousands of people, and you never seen anything like that. So the only thing you may know about them is the fragments of DNA where they intermixed with others that you already have seen. That's how we are very knowledgeable in the so the original 1,000 genomes came, they weren't very diverse. We sequenced 1,000 genomes, and based on that data, we built sort of a table of variants. But then it did not apply very well to some Asian ethnicities, definitely didn't apply very well to African American ethnicities, specifically to African ethnicities, because some of the assumptions were plain wrong in Africa, where certain variants propagate just within the continent. So the knowledge of your ethnicity based on this DNA is only as good as your database. The database is good, and every time they bring in a new person, they record how this person is built up, and that's why we can refine the level of resolution. So anecdotally, if a friend just got requalified from French ancestry to Italian ancestry, or vice versa, I don't remember, but it was a major blow to him because he used to think of him as one, and it turned out he was the other. That is because they zeroed in on enough people in the neighborhood of the village from which he originally or his ancestors come from, and that's how they were able to establish it. So it's a fun fact. But in general, ancestral lines are well established, and by performing Ancestry.com or 23andMe test, they'll be able to tell you where you come from. So that is pretty accurate. Now, what's it going to do to your sort of genetic health? I'm not sure. And that's why it's not regulated by FDA. You can whip it up and perform this test and just have this, knowledge. What to do with it? Not sure.
And so let's go back to AI because we'll talk about AI today. So we were talking about safety. We were talking about the future of the industry. We talked about FDA. So with the AI, because I'm pretty sure that there are quite a few listeners that are going to be concerned about the patient safety once AI is going to be more deployed. What are your thoughts about it? What would you respond to them?
I think that for a while, qualified individuals in the field will continue putting their signatures on the genetic diagnostic reports. That means that any result is reviewed by a qualified professional. AI may be there to help them navigate the databases of variants, the multitude of publications, all of that. They may be able to contribute to weighing out the importance of certain variants and such. May be able to find a reference to relevant clinical study for a particular variant, something like that. But rest assured that there's always going to be a signature of a qualified professional on the bottom line of that report, and the report will be valid and not just some mumbo-jumbo generated by AI, which doesn't always even give the right answer because of the way it's tuned. It may be over-tuned to want to please you so much that this will produce an answer where there's none. So I think from that standpoint, genetic diagnostics is safe, and I'm sure it's been there before FDA decided to regulate the field, and that's how I'm sure it's going to remain. It's medical science. We don't mess with it.
Would you expect in the future any additional regulations coming out from FDA once AI will be more integrated into the field?
Yes, I do, and I see it even now. So for a while, we perform these experiments which generate massive amounts of data that is then analyzed and distilled down to specific variants that we consider in our diagnostic reports. It used to be just done by some means of bioinformatics. We don't know exactly how, and everyone had their own pipeline, and everyone was processing their data in a particular in their favorite way. up until someone said, hey, listen, how did you arrive to this result? If what you do in the lab, like we come to your lab and we make sure that your fridge is cold, that your water is clean, that you don't spit in the tube as you set up your experiment, shouldn't we regulate the informatics way which you implement to arrive to from the data to the result? And so now it is necessary to certify in a specific way the analysis pipeline. In my opinion, these efforts are pretty naive at this point because people who are seeking to regulate this don't know enough in sort of IT, and people who perform the analysis just continue doing it in their favorite way and maybe have a brief description of what it is that they do. But it's definitely an important component of a genetic test, especially with the complexity that genetic tests are nowadays, especially for cancer, for circulating tumor DNA and things like this. And so AI being this another sort of black box there will have to be somehow certified in that it arrives to the accurate conclusions. It's still a tool, and from the regulatory position, I would imagine that every tool contributing to the final result of a test has to be certified.
And my next question is going to be, since we have AI in every industry right now, and I see every industry is being incredibly concerned where the jobs are going to be, because some jobs are going to be, we are seeing loss of jobs in some fields, and also we are seeing creation and the jobs in other fields due to AI. Mm-hmm. So what's happening in your field, and I'm curious how it's going to affect scientists.
So
are they going to stay as relevant as they are today?
It is my hope and my belief that scientists will always stay relevant. Maybe in inventing the next level of AI to supplant the previous one. But I
should say, maybe I will reframe it. Well, scientists will stay relevant, but are they going to be working in the same capacity? Are they going to be, is research going to change? What changes AI is going to bring to the scientific world, the genetics?
The research will change indeed. The publications that I'm seeing now are very different in terms of their design and complexity, because you can try and implement these complex informatics tools to search for correlations that you would not be able to spot before and draw conclusions of certain kind. So I think as data complexity is becoming exponentially higher and higher, we need some kind of a tool that is just as complex to process this data. And we humans with abacus can no longer go, 3 mutations of this kind, 5 mutations of that kind. A calculator won't do it anymore. So we do need more complex tools, and I feel that AI provides it. I feel that AI generates certain ideas in some way that we can implement. So I like that. What's going to happen to scientists? Well, the definition of science keeps changing, right? the experiments that were done 200 years ago and that seemed to be the state of art back then, they no longer are. So as complexity keeps going up, so do the tools, so do the minds, and people who are now in the labs performing AI-based experiments will roll out some AI-based genetic tests, give it time. That's how everything around us evolves. Now, in immediate terms, things that people were specializing in, certain aspects of it are now handled probably better by AI-like tools. And these unique skills may no longer be that unique. We as scientists have to evolve as well. And if today you were adding 5 milliliters from this cup to that cup, and that was the scope of your job, and you got replaced by a machine that does that, maybe you could then build the new iteration of this machine, and maybe you can think of what's going to come next and improve that, or improve the results and focus on the analysis of the results. So I hope that there's room for all of these efforts within the ever-evolving field of genetic diagnostics.
And we are coming to the end, and I cannot stop myself by asking the question, in your opinion, with all these developments that are coming to the field, what is the craziest prediction for the future in the field of genetics you see? Because there is also this DNA studying right now from, this discussions about, okay, we can study DNA, we can predict that the child is being born, we can twist DNA here, twist DNA there, we can make people live forever. Just so many publications about this. So, crazy stuff.
So I'm glad that as you were asking, I was kind of thinking about along the same line. How soon can we create superhumans and so on, or predict right away what's going to happen to this particular child and their timeline and so on? Genetics at some point runs into ethical issues, right? It's inevitable. And it's, you go to any genetics conference and you will see that ethics, bioethics, is a significant part, or at least one of the parts of the science that goes around the subject, because we need to think of what is it that we can and cannot do. The agreement is such that we don't alter humans at this point because of ethical concerns, and also because we don't feel that we have tools that are precise enough to fix just this problem and walk away from it. We don't know what the side effects are going to be. If you mention this to FDA will have you studying side effects for generations. Again, somewhere there's going to be the drive to alter humans. And the craziest idea is probably that people will start creating or genetically engineering their children with all good intentions. But will it be the world of superhumans? Will it be brought to a next level of normalcy? Remains to be seen. I prefer to think about genetic diagnostics as a science of helping to detect and cure disease rather than making these cardinal changes to the buildup of humans. Some people may think differently.
And on that note, if there is one advice you would give to our listeners about taking a test, choosing a test for conducting a proper lifestyle, what would you recommend?
The first thing I'll say is be aware of genetic diagnostics. It is quite impressive that despite its pretty wide availability, it is only used in limited amount of situations and in limited number of hospitals and so on. So be aware of it, read up on it, don't be afraid of it. If your doc recommends a genetic test, take it. It is a well-established, valid tool, just like your MRI or a blood test. I think it's very important to just make it popular, to make it commonly acceptable, to make it widespread. And we are in a privileged society where we can actually afford the results of this science, and this genetic testing is no longer a dream. So please use it. Ask your doc if genetic testing is right for you. At the same time, be aware of the limited capabilities. We still cannot tell whether you're going to be a good soccer player at 23. We still cannot tell whether a child is going to have this or that outside of certain well-established diseases. Bear with us as we evolve together with you.
Thank you very much. If anybody from our listeners will want to find you to receive more information,
happy to talk with anyone.
Where they can find you?
They should probably go to you and ask for my email, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that I receive.
Or perhaps a LinkedIn profile. You'll find Yuriy's LinkedIn profile and the end of this podcast. And thank you for listening to us again. Thank you for helping us to grow our community. Please check out our website. And thank you for supporting Adastra.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh.